Hi, do you know about the amazing features of C Sharp 7? And have you tried those? If not, then coming up, top 5 features for C Sharp 7. Hello YouTubers, welcome to Help Me Coder, the channel which talks about technology and helps the coder community out there. C Sharp 7 has come up with lot of interesting features, and out of those, I have selected top 5 amazing features for you. Number 1 feature in this list is Tuples. They are a way to return more than one values from a method. In earlier version of C Sharp, we did had some ways to approach this, like we had custom data types, out parameters, and tuple objects, but they all had some pitfalls and they used to lack in some way or another. So let's first quickly look into the old ways of returning values. The first approach that we are going to look into is the out parameter. So over here, I have created a method called getUserDetails where I am accepting a ID, the user ID, and based on the user ID, I'm returning the address, age, and the name of the user. Out parameters, the major disadvantage that you see over here is that you have to define these parameters even before you are using it. So means you have to declare them upfront. The other disadvantage is that you cannot be using out parameter for asynchronous methods. So this is the out parameter. The other way of doing it was using your custom data type. Now consider this example where I have created a class called user_details class, and in this user_detail class I have created 3 parameters called address, properties called address, age, and name. Now in this method I am again accepting one user ID, and then I am getting the information about that user, and I am assigning the properties over here and then returning this whole user details object back to the calling method. Now if I show you the calling method, which is over here, so I'm getting this object over here ob, and then writing back the values like ob.name, ob.address, and ob.age. So this makes your code a lot verbose. As for just returning values from a method, you are creating a class and maybe you are using the class only once, hence it adds an extra overhead for you to create the class and then attaching properties to the values. The third old approach of passing multiple values from a method was the tuple class, and how we used to define the tuple class was this, where we need to identify like what are the different types of values we are returning, and then we put it under the return type of that tuple class, and then we define those values over here. The major advantage of this one was that it was a reference type, and hence for the memory intensive operation this cannot be used or should not be used. Secondly, while accessing these values, so if you have to access the returned values from the method, you need to provide the exact item number. So if, for example, if it is item 1 is the first item, you need to specify item 1, then item 2, or item 3. You cannot explicitly name those returns. So finally in C Sharp 7, tuple values was introduced. This tuple value had lot of advantages over its counterpart. One of the advantage was that it was a value type, so it was not that memory intense. Other was that you can name your returns. So for example, if you see the method, which is this method over here, so I have named my return type as address, age, and name, which was not possible with the tuple class. Also, if you see, so I have passed the student ID, and from here I am creating a variable called student info, and I am setting those all 3 values over here, and then passing this student info from here, which is collected over here and saved it into this tuple value type. And then I can access those tuple value type like with address, with age, and with name. So tuple can be used to return multiple values. They can also be used as a dictionary so that you can, for a single key, you can have multiple values. They can also be used as a global variable so that you can declare a variable on the top with multiple values, and then you can use them throughout your code instead of declaring lot of different constants. Also, you can use tuple inline. Number 2 in our feature list is out parameter. So now we can declare an out variable right at the point where it is defined as an or passed as an out argument. So in the earlier approach, if you see this code over here, we have to define the variable. So we declare this variable over here, then we are using the out variable. So you cannot use directly without declaring or defining it over here. But in the new approach, this has changed. Now we can directly initialize and define it straight at the place we are trying to use this. So this is a very welcome move, and it does provide lot of easiness for the developers or the coders to write this code. Coming to the third very important feature in C#7 is called the pattern matching. So pattern matching allows you to check a particular object or element against a pattern or shape. So if that pattern or shape does match to your element or object, then basically you can use the properties of that object or the element. Giving you a real life example, if for example I give you a wrapped fruit and I ask you whether to tell me whether that pattern of that fruit, the wrapped fruit, is apple or banana, you basically touches that and then find out if it is an apple or banana, and then you perform different set of activities based on whatever it is, or you access the properties of that particular fruit. In C#7, two existing language constructs have been provided or enhanced to use those patterns, which is an is expression and then a case expression. If I show you with an example, over here we have a class called vehicle which has two properties called number of tire and vehicle number. So this is a very generic vehicle class. Now this class has been inherited by scooter, which is having its own property called number of cylinder. Now there is one more class called truck which is inheriting the generic class called vehicle. Then over here we are creating an object of scooter and object of a truck. Now if we want to send these objects to a separate method where that method will decide what kind of object it is, in our old approach the things used to work like this. So you send the vehicle object, which is a very generic object, so you pass this s and t over here, which comes to this method. Now we first check basically whether the object that is received by this method is a scooter or is a truck. If it belongs to scooter, basically we convert this object as scooter. So there is a twofold approach. First we check whether it is a scooter or is a truck, then we convert that object to that particular type, and then only we can use the specific properties of that scooter, or as to say that truck. With this new approach, things have got little easier. Now you don't have to follow the two approach. You can just straight away check over here if the object is scooter. If that is a scooter, the values of that scooter object or the properties will be accessible from the scooter object. Then it will come inside and you can directly access scooter object dot number of cylinder. Similarly with the truck object, you just create on a single line if the object is truck, and then you create a simple parameter to hold this object if it is the case. Then you use this parameter truck object dot capacity to access that specific value. So fourth feature in our top 5 list is ref returns and local. In earlier version of C#, we can only pass ref value as a parameter in a method, but in C#7 we can now return ref values and also assign ref values to local variables. The To see this in action, let's see with an example. If you see example 1, we are having a reference variable method where we are having an array value on line 59 where it has 5 values, and we are passing these array values to a method called return ref sec element. Now in this array, we are changing the third value to number 40, and we are returning the reference over here of the third value. Now when you print this value over here, you will see that the value will get changed from 30 to 40. So this shows that we can return the reference now with this new feature. Also, when we return reference, we can only access those returned values into ref local variables, which is with this case. So if you see over here, this is an array value, and we are storing this array reference to this array value into a reference variable, which is a ref local variable. Now coming to the last feature for our C# top 5 feature list is local functions. Many times we have to define functions or methods that has to be called only once, but still we create separate methods inside our code, and then we call those methods from outside. In C#7, now we can create those methods inside the context of the current method. This basically makes it easier for people to understand the segregation of your code while keeping the readability of the code intact. Imagine you have lot of different methods which are used by your calling code only once, and then those methods are scattered throughout your whole C# file. Now this makes it very unreadable because you have to scroll up and down to reach out to that particular code. So in C#7, you can define these methods inside the context of the calling method. The other advantage of local function is that for some cases, we can make sure that the proper validations are done before we call the method. Let's see this with an example. With an old approach, if you see, we are calling the method called getName. Now, getName gets a name for you. So it gets stored in the name object. So over here it checks if this name is empty or not. If it is empty, it throws a argument exception that a name is required. Now, if it is not empty, then it comes to this method where it sends the name and how many times I want to display this. Then it goes to the display text over here and it displays it that many number of times. Now, as this method is lying outside of the calling method, which is over here, we may have an issue when this method gets called from some other place, and that some other place doesn't checks for this null or empty. So instead, what we can do is we can include this method as part of this whole main method. Now this method, I have taken it out and I have put it into this whole main method. I am calling it from within the same method to the local function. Now, if you see this, I can access the value number of times. Even though this is a separate method, I can access this value over here. And then this makes us also secure enough that it can never be called from outside. So I'm rest assured that this getName has been checked for the null or empty. Also, it makes it easier for people to understand this code, and it brings about a proper segregation of the code, and while keeping the readability of your code intact. This brings us to the end of top 5 features of C#7. Thanks for watching this video. Do hit the like and subscribe button on the channel Help Me Coder down below. Also, let us know how do you plan to use these new features in your projects. I have provided the description in the description section below. Thanks for watching. Happy coding.